Hello, and welcome to the Mayer Brown webcast on COVID-19 implications for SEC and CFTC registrants. This presentation will feature Mayer Brown partners Matthew Kluchenik and Marlon Paz, as well as associates Ainsley Shrimp and Kyle Swan. Matt and Ainsley will start us off discussing recent COVID-19 relief measures taken by the CFTC. Matt, I'll turn it over to you to begin.
Thanks, Michael. This is Matt Kluchenik, a partner in the Chicago office. Thanks for joining the presentation today. I hope everybody is doing well in these extraordinarily difficult times. I, along with my colleague Ainsley Shrimp, we're going to cover the CFTC and NFA COVID-19 related developments. And then Marlon Paz and Kyle Swan will cover the SEC developments. So turning to the next slide, we set forth an agenda here. We talk about, again, CFTC, NFA developments, SEC and FINRA developments, touch on shelter orders, implications for financial institutions briefly, and then there's a reference page of Mayer Brown COVID-19 resources. So going forward a couple of slides to slide number 4. This slide provides a general overview of the CFTC's COVID-19 relief. The CFTC has been, I think, by any account, very active, not only in terms of issuing no action letters with respect to various market participants and, quite frankly, every type of market participant or registrant, but also with respect to day-to-day business. We're seeing a number of issues being tackled that are unrelated to COVID-19. Turning to the next slide here, slide 5, a general theme with respect to the CFTC no action letters is the focus on supervision and more specifically business continuity plans. And so the CFTC in issuing its various letters has made clear that staff of the CFTC in the various divisions that make up the CFTC have said that they will not recommend an enforcement action to the Commission for various types of delineated activities so long as market participants essentially meet 3 requirements. And the first is to establish and maintain a tailored supervisory system that's reasonably designed to supervise the activities of personnel, including personnel, of course, working off-site, while acting from an alternative location, that is that off-site location, during the current crisis. The DSIO and DMO issued relief for most registrants on March 17th, and DSIO provided relief to CPOs on March 20th. On the next slide here, 6, overview of the National Futures Association's COVID-19 related relief. Important question we've received is, given that so many employees and associated persons in particular are working from their homes or somewhere else, does that particular location constitute a branch office? And if so, what needs to be done? So fortunately, and to NFA's credit, they quickly came out of the gate and addressed this particular issue and said in its notice to members, that a branch office need not be designated if certain requirements are satisfied. The first, more general requirement is that such a circumstance, teleworking or working off-site, is or should be addressed as part of the business continuity plan. So there should be procedures regarding this in the business continuity plan. So long as the market participant or the registrant in this case implements alternative supervisory methods to adequately supervise associated person activities, including the meeting of record-keeping requirements, and ensures that the procedures are documented, then NFA has said that it will not pursue enforcement action against such a registrant or registrant personnel. So the key things here is, again, supervisory method as well as procedures on the documentation of certain activities, which we're going to talk more about shortly. Turning to the next slide, slide 7 here. In the next few slides, we focus on specific categories of market registrants, market participants and registrants. And the first one here on 7 would be Futures Commission merchants introducing brokers and swap dealers. Stepping back with respect to the CFTC, the DSIO staff granted these registrants the following relief, namely relief with respect to the recording of oral communications, as well as relief from the time-stamping requirements with respect to remote socially distanced locations. And more specifically, in terms of the recording of oral communications, if you take a look at CFTC letter 2003, the CFTC staff, DSIO, has said that until June 30th of 2020, any requirement to make and keep records of oral communications pursuant to the general record-keeping provision, CFTC Rule 135, where personnel are required, if the personnel are required to use recorded lines are required by the registrant's written business continuity plan to be absent from their normal business site, that will be subject to relief provided that a written record of the oral communication, including the date, time, identifying information of the persons participating, and subject matter of the communication is created and maintained in accordance with CFTC Rule 135. And then, in addition, the registrant takes affirmative steps to collect any written materials created by any affected personnel pertaining to the contents of the oral communication, including, for example, handwritten notes or other contemporaneously or subsequently created transcripts or summaries. And those need to be maintained pursuant to CFTC Rule 131. So we're seeing, for example, clients requiring or asking various personnel and associated persons in particular to keep something akin to a diary, if you will, for work purposes that, again, itemizes and memorializes the various conversations and discussions. With respect to timestamps in that particular CFTC letter, the staff has said that also up until June 30th of 2020, any requirement to record the date and time by timestamp or other timing device pursuant to Rules 135 or 155.3, if the personnel responsible for making those records are required, again, pursuant to a business continuity plan to be absent from their normal business site, is subject to relief so long as a record of the date and time to the nearest minute is otherwise created and maintained in accordance with Rules 135 and 155.3. So once again, something akin to a diary or notes to that effect. If we turn to the next slide here, slide I-8, DSI focused in particular on retail Forex dealers. The relief is similar to that which I just described, is set forth in CFTC letter 2005. NFA has also granted additional relief for RFEDs that are NFA Forex dealer members, including with respect to the preparation of a CCO annual report that meets the requirements of Rule 3.3, as well as other relief. So going to the next slide, number 9, the staff also addressed floor brokers. Given that the exchanges, the trading floors of the various DCMs in the U.S. are closed, this isn't too relevant, but relief has been granted to that registrant category as well. Moving on to the next slide, members of DCMs and SEFs. DSIO granted those members relief as well with respect to the recording of oral communications and time stamping pursuant to the requirements that I earlier discussed. Those requirements are set forth in CFTC letter 2002. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Ansley Shrimp, who's going to discuss CPOs, some other registrant activities, and happenings with respect to NFA and CFTC. Ansley?
Thank you, Matt. So first we will talk about CPOs, Commodities Pool Operators. So DSIO provided relief in a second wave to CPOs subject to applicable conditions. Most of these involve reporting requirements. And so for the form CPO PQR under CFTC Rule 4.27, small or mid-sized CPOs are basically granted an extension provided that they make their filing by May 15th, 2020. So the large CPOs are granted an extension so long as they file their quarterly reports required under CFTC Rule 4.27 by July 15th, 2020. And then for the pool annual reports under 4.7 again and 4.22b, any requirement that a CPO with a pool annual report due on or before April 30th file such report is now given an extension so long as the certified annual or financial statements for the pools are filed with NFA and distributed to pool participants no later than 45 days after the due date for such report. Even though that's a 45-day extension, it doesn't foreclose a CPO from requesting an additional extension of up to 180 days from the end of the pool's fiscal year, consistent with CFTC Rule 4.22F. So that would need to be something addressed directly with the regulators. Furthermore, pool periodic account statements under 4.7 or 4.22b have been granted an extension. So a monthly or quarterly basis, these are required, and they are granted an extension of up to 45 days from the end of the reporting period for all reporting periods ending on or before April 30th, 2020. And so the CPO relief from the CFTC was granted in letter number 2011. Even though the CFTC has not addressed CTAs, NFA subsequently has granted CTA relief from the rule requirement in NFA Compliance Rule 246 that each CTA member filed a Form PR on a quarterly basis with NFA within 45 days after the end of each quarter. CTA members are now, for the quarter ended March 31st, 2020, given until May 15th, 2020. And so NFA has extended that March 31st date until June 30th, 2020. So that May 15th date is now June 30th for CTAs. And moving on to slide 13, for DCMs, DMO has granted no action relief, largely consistent with the relief that Matt discussed earlier with respect to time stamping. The DCM must require affected market participants to continue to conduct customer business in accordance with their rules, including, DSIO, no action letters listed in the slide, and continue to create a written record of oral communications for any that they have. Customer orders entered into the trading platform by affected market participants must be retained on the DCM's normal systems. All other exchange rules, including those relating to the handling of customer orders and trade practices, will continue to apply to affected market participant trading activity during the duration of this particular crisis. And so, there is limited relief, particularly for those remote trading situations that aren't typically permitted. And then for CEFs, DMO will not recommend that the CFTC take an enforcement action against any CEF or CEF CCO for failure to submit an annual compliance report within the 60-day period prescribed in CFTC Rule 37-150 or 1,501 F2, provided that the ACR was required to be submitted to the CFTC prior to September 1st, 2020, and that it's submitted not later than 120 days after the end of the CEF fiscal year. So that's effectively a 60-day extension for CEF on the annual report. And then DMO has also granted relief for any CEF or CEF CCO who doesn't submit a fourth quarter financial report pursuant to the rule requirement within the 60-day period. Again, that's been extended to 120 days for any report that's required to be submitted prior to September 1st of 2020. Additionally, on top of the market participant release, the actual agencies have experienced their own changes. So both the CFTC and NFA have certain staff members working remotely. Chairman Tarbert canceled the open meeting scheduled for last Friday, and the CFTC staff have created a dedicated web page related to its COVID-19 efforts. That URL is in the presentation, and it's www.cftc.gov/coronavirus. In addition to market participant relief, the staff have also issued a customer advisory regarding, the public being on alert for fraud seeking to profit from the recent market volatility related to the virus. So that's available on the CFTC's webpage as well. As far as NFA is concerned, I think most of their staff are working remotely. Any new NFA arbitration claims must now be filed online rather than by mail. And NFA has created its own web page as well, which you can find on its website landing page. And that provides the online link for any of those arbitrations. NFA's Chicago office has suspended its applicant fingerprinting until further notice. I think they refer out to some other government sites that are potentially available for that, but I'm not sure that those are necessarily open and available for fingerprinting at this point either. So any questions related to fingerprints should probably be directed to NFA's Info Center, which is still operating as normal. And then also the Series 3 administrator has temporarily closed its testing centers. They said it was for a period of 30 days starting March 18th. So, pending that, staying true to the 30-day period, you're looking at about, April 18th or so before that testing resumes. And now I'm going to hand it over to Marlon Paz so he can continue with our SEC release. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is Marlon Paz. I'm a partner at Mayer Brown, and I head the broker-dealer regulation and compliance practice. We will cover the COVID-19 pandemic-related relief and guidance by the SEC and FINRA, and touch on how that relief is potentially impacting the financial services and the capital markets. The SEC assembled a working group across all divisions to prepare for the adverse effects of COVID-19. That group has been monitoring both the real and the potential effects of COVID-19 on a variety of market participants, not just public companies, but also clearing agencies, exchanges, accounting firms, investor representatives, credit rating agencies, funds, investment advisors, and others. Some of the key focus issues have included both the trading and the capital markets, the securities infrastructure or the plumbing, large firms, the asset management industry, both the macro trends and dynamics and potential impacts on the securities capital markets, issuers, corporate disclosures and accounting issues, and ongoing coordination with both within the U.S., with other parts of the government, and with foreign financial the regulatory community. We'll touch on some of those today. The SEC has provided guidance and some targeted regulatory relief to various market participants that are being impacted by COVID-19 through various statements, guidance, and exempted relief to alleviate the operational and other burdens that are being caused. Note that the, quote, shelter-in-place rules and social distancing have required regulators and firms to adjust to this new normal. We're going to discuss the shelter-in-place rules a bit later, but note that this expanded outreach by the SEC and others it's shown a real engagement by the regulators. So let's turn to some of those targeted issues. First, again, we're going to highlight some of the, I guess, more important ones or more key ones, but there are other measures that are being taken by the regulators. With respect to issuers, there was a conditional exemptive order providing relief and assistance to companies that are affected by COVID-19. It extends certain periodic reporting deadlines, like filing of your periodic reports. It includes disclosure considerations related to insider trading, selective disclosures, and forward-looking statements. Very important to take a look at this for any reporting company. The firms are encouraged to contact the SEC staff if they require additional assistance in compliance. We are carefully staying very closely in touch with the staff, and we definitely encourage this outreach to ensure that in this very dynamic and fluid environment, the disclosures are done appropriately. The corporation finance staff has provided guidance to facilitate continued shareholder engagements, such as virtual meetings, or for companies and funds affected by COVID-19. So if a firm wants to change the date, the time, or the location of an annual shareholder meeting, that needs to be adequately disclosed. Virtual meetings, which are often governed by state law, are on issuer's documents. So robust disclosure on how to access and participate in these meetings is very important. Rule 14A8, which governs the shareholder communications, and then looking at what proponents and activists may do in this space. There are special considerations for how those proposals may now be presented at annual meetings. The staff in the Division of Corporation Finance has encouraged reporting companies to allow the presentation by alternative means as long as it's permitted by state law. Turning to financial intermediaries, the SEC has provided relief for registered transfer agents and certain other persons. So in light of the challenges, certain transfer agents have been unable to comply with some or all of the requirements imposed on them. Transfer agents and other persons, exempted personnel, have been exempted from some of the fingerprinting rules, for example. The temporary exemption goes through May 30th, 2020. There are many challenges being faced today by transfer agents. While the world is a lot less, paper-based and much more digital, there still is quite a bit of mechanical aspects of a transfer agent's role in order to comply with Sections 17 Cap A and 17F of the Exchange Act and the rules thereunder. I believe that the SEC staff in the Division of Trading and Markets continues to monitor this space. Trading and Market staff has provided no action relief with respect to CAT, or the Consolidated Audit Trail Reporting. The CAT NMS plan, or National Market System Plan, has set deadlines for the industry to record and report data to the central repository. In light of the stress being caused by COVID-19, the COVID-19 pandemic, the infrastructure and implementing the business continuity plans related to CAT implementation deadlines are not going to be enforced against industry members through May 20th, 2020. Again, I believe that this situation will continue to be fluid with some perhaps further refinements therein as the staff continues to monitor and engage with the industry in this regard. Continuing with financial intermediaries, Certain rules have been proposed for immediate effectiveness, so they are now effective through 19b4, filed with the SEC, a Division of Trading and Markets, and some of those relate to facilitating continued operations, for example, by CBOE, the Securities Exchange, actually in light of temporary suspensions of the physical trading floor. We've seen similar orders by the NYSE permitting electronic auctions in light of temporary closure of the physical trading floor. So the shifts to permit, or the operational ability by both CBOE options and NYSE electronic options to operate without a physical trading floor is, I believe, an incremental step, since the markets have certainly become much more electronic in recent times. Back in '87, when I worked at the New York Stock Exchange, we had mostly paper, some slight introduction of technology with dot and super dot, and now most of it is electronic. Nevertheless, the rules are now permitting the implementation of this operational change to permit full electronic auction to operate without a actual trading floor. I'm going to pause here, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Kyle Swan, who also practices in the same area with me at Mayer Brown. Kyle?
Thanks, Marlon. So the SEC has taken a few actions already to address concerns with investment companies and investment advisors. Much of this has been related to containing the spread of COVID-19 and the limitations on travel and things such as shelter-in-place rules, which has prevented people from meeting in person. So to the extent that there was previous no action relief relating to fund board meetings earlier or recently from the Independent Directors Council no action letter that accepts certain in-person voting requirements in the event of unforeseen or emergency circumstances. The SEC staff and the Division of Investment Management has addressed COVID-19 as qualifying as an unforeseen or emergency circumstance, and then extended their no action position to cover all approvals and renewals, which would include material changes or approvals and renewals, and the selection of an independent public accountant through June 15th, 2020. Beyond that, there are some issues that have been arising relating to short-term liquidity, particularly in the market for securities held by money market mutual funds. There was no action relief issued just last week that is a companion release to the Federal Reserve's creation and expansion of their money market liquidity facility that's intended to address some of these issues for liquidity and things like commercial paper that are held by money market mutual funds. The no action letter provided by the SEC staff here has addressed certain conflicts between Rule 17A9 that would exempt certain affiliated transactions and 23A and 23B of the Federal Reserve Act and Reg W to allow affiliates of funds classified as money market mutual funds to purchase money market mutual fund securities subject to certain conditions, including purchasing it at a fair market value as determined by a third-party pricing service, and satisfying all of the requirements of 17A9 except to the extent that they conflict with banking regs, and timely filing and reporting of these affiliate transactions on Form NCR, noting reliance on this no action relief. This relief is in effect until further notice and is expected to be temporary as long as these liquidity issues continue. Some money market mutual fund affiliates have already taken advantage of this relief, including some major market participants. Beyond that, in addressing further liquidity concerns that have affected more than just money market mutual funds, investment management has issued a temporary exemption from the rules surrounding inter-fund lending that will permit greater flexibility and allow funds to obtain short-term liquidity. There are three primary items addressed by this exemptive order. Notably, registered open-end funds other than money market mutual funds and insurance company separate accounts that are registered as UITs can borrow from certain affiliates that are not banks or registered investment companies through collateralized loans subject to certain conditions such as board approval and notification to IM staff. Other registered investment companies who are already subject to exemptive inter-fund lending relief can also make loans up to 25% of their current assets or borrow or make short-term loans under certain repayment conditions subject to board approval, where they provide notice to IM staff and publicly disclose reliance on this order. Further, IM's expanded this relief to other registered investment companies who have not otherwise received exemptive orders subject to disclosure, staff notification, board approval, and other conditions where they can fall in line with prior inter-fund lending precedent. The order also allows open-end funds to deviate from their fundamental policies, provided they receive board approval and disclose such matters and notify IM staff. This relief extends until a date specified in a public notice from the staff stating that the relief will terminate, and that date will be at least 2 weeks from the date of the notice and no earlier than June 30th, 2020. So as the world is also adjusting to remote and telework arrangements and various quarantine efforts, IM staff has provided some guidance and relief in the form of FAQs that have been updated to account for the implementation of these measures due to COVID-19. So they've addressed the need for investment advisors to work from a temporary location. In this case, they would not recommend enforcement where a firm fails to update their Form ADV to list temporary teleworking addresses in light of teleworking arrangements that have been conducted pursuant to a firm's business continuity plan. And then further, because of office closures and shelter-in-place orders, where an advisor inadvertently receives client securities, they generally have to return to sender. However, in this case, where they cannot access mail or deliveries at an office location due to the implementation of the firm's business continuity plan, IM staff doesn't consider the advisor to have received the client assets until personnel are able to access that location. Next, I'll be turning to some recent FINRA guidance and relief that has been put out to address broker-dealers dealing with COVID-19 issues. So FINRA recently put out Regulatory Notice 2008. So this notice addresses some of the business continuity issues that firms should be addressing that would relate to pandemic conditions, and also provides some regulatory relief for firms who can no longer comply as easily with some of the FINRA rules. So first, FINRA recommends that firms review their business continuity plans and be sure that they're prepared to implement them in case of the requirement, in case they feel they are required to implement them due to COVID-19. In reviewing their plans, they should also consider any sort of teleworking arrangements and other logistical issues that may arise relating to the pandemic. They should also consider the effects of emergency office relocations and remote or telework arrangements and the implications this could have on potential supervisory requirements under FINRA rules. During this time, FINRA also noted that there's an increased cybersecurity risk because people are starting to work remotely more often or telework, and just in general because of the stresses of implementing all of these new systems. And further, FINRA has noted that people or firms should prepare for communication disruptions that may occur as a result of all of these movements. From there, FINRA has provided some regulatory relief for its members, notably that on-site inspections may need to be postponed and should be considered whether they can be completed in 2020 or whether they would have to be postponed further. FINRA suspended certain requirements under Form U4 and Form BR to maintain updated office locations and branch locations where there are temporary teleworking arrangements. And then in response to regulatory filings and other FINRA inquiries, matters, and investigations, FINRA has noted that extensions are available upon request, and late fees may be waived under certain circumstances, with the exception that under Rule 15C3.3, the filing requirements relating to reserve formula computations that must be made weekly are still in effect. And then beyond that, because of the closure of testing locations and in general the need to focus on the implementation of business continuity plans, qualifications exams, and the continuing education requirement deadlines are also available for extension. And certain licensing, and FINRA would like to remind firms of certain licensing and registration designations that are available to military and National Guard personnel who are called in for active duty. FINRA has also had a lot of ongoing efforts to release FAQs to provide guidance on certain big topic issues that may be affected by COVID-19. First, they address advertising regulation, where in case of communication disruptions, firms should place a notice online if they're affected or their customers are affected, indicating how customers can contact them to address certain important issues. And further, Rule 2210 that requires the filing of retail communications or certain retail communications would typically not include a communication regarding COVID-19 where it doesn't fit the other criteria of a retail communication that's required to be filed, such as making a financial or investment recommendation or otherwise promoting a product or service. Turning next to AML, FINRA has reminded firms that they have through December 31st, 2020 to complete their annual independent AML testing. So to the extent firms may not be able to complete that testing during a period where they have to shelter in place or implement their business continuity plan, they can complete it later in the year. FINRA has also reminded firms that they are not relieved of their best execution obligations during this time, and they still must exercise reasonable diligence to ascertain best market for a security and buy and sell in that market so that the price is as favorable as possible to the customer under those market conditions. However, FINRA noted that they are taking into account COVID-19 in determining what constitutes reasonable diligence, as it's sort of based on the facts and circumstances of the situation. Beyond that, FINRA's extended other deadlines that are relevant to its members. FINRA has assured its members that where they meet the exempted provisions of Rule 15C33K or file a Part 2A focus report, they are being provided an extension for annual and focus reports, respectively, for 30 calendar days and 10 business days. Further, certain procedural elements have been waived that relate to those extensions and requesting those extensions. Qualifications exams due to test center closures, the deadline for expiring qualification exam windows have been extended until May 31st, 2020. This is also effectively extending the 120-day principal exam deadline of FINRA Rule 1210.04. Individual registration. So Form U4 has typically required a wet signature, which in current conditions has potentially created some issues. So now firms can use e-signatures in certain cases with their Rule 1010 filings. Further, FINRA has addressed Forms U4 and Form BR as relate to temporary relocations. While they're not required to update those forms due to these relocations, they should use their best efforts to notify FINRA if they relocate personnel to a temporary location. Finally, FINRA has addressed issues relating to business continuity. So although it's not required to inform FINRA when a business continuity plan is activated, they encourage notifying, they encourage that notification. Firms should review their emergency contacts to ensure they're up to date. This will ensure that FINRA is able to contact them in case of emergency. And this can be completed through FINRA's contact system, which is available online. So further, there are, firms should note the supervisory and systems implications that may result from ongoing remote or telework arrangements. Firms are still under a duty to supervise these people, their associated persons and representatives, even where they are working from a different location. And then FINRA has also encouraged firms to reach out in case they need any further deadline extensions or the waiver of late fees. FINRA has also provided FAQs relating to supervision. So the Rule 3120 Supervisory Controls Report and 3130 annual certification deadlines that are typically due on an annual basis are being extended through May 31st, 2020, where they fall between March 1st and May 1st. This is also sort of a fluid situation, so we can sort of expect updates on all deadline-related materials as we go forward. Similarly, members also have until May 31st, 2020 to report their Q1 2020 statistical and summary information regarding written customer complaints under Rule 4530. And further, FINRA has also provided an extension of deadlines for submitting fingerprint information. So firms that would be required to submit fingerprint information due to a submission of Form U4 between February 15th and May 30th will now have until June 29th. And with that, I'll turn it back to Marlon to address some special topics relating to the securities industry during this time.
Thank you, Kyle. So again, we note that this is a particularly fluid situation, and we want to ensure that you stay abreast of all the latest. At the end of this presentation, we'll provide some additional resources, but I wanted to note a few special topics of interest and some updates. So today, the SEC issued a statement and an order amending the March 4th order mentioned at the top of the hour here with respect to issuers. Note that the conditional exemption from reporting and proxy delivery requirements for reporting companies, for funds and investment advisors that have been affected by COVID-19 has now been extended as of today. Chairman Clayton has noted, quote, "These actions provide temporary targeted relief to issuers, investment funds, and investment advisors affected by COVID-19, close quote. With respect to public companies, the order extends or provides for a 45-day extension to file certain disclosure reports that would otherwise have been due between March 1st and July 1st, 2020. Again, this supersedes and extends the March 4th order we mentioned a few slides ago. With respect to investment funds and advisor relief, the SEC issued a couple of orders that provide investment funds and investment advisors with additional time with respect to holding in-person board meetings and meeting certain filing and delivery requirements that are applicable. And those orders supersede and extend the filing periods covered by the SEC's original order of March 13th. Public company disclosure, the Division of Corporation Finance today issued disclosure guidance topic number 9, which provides the staff's current views regarding disclosure and other securities law obligations that companies should consider with respect to COVID-19 and related business and market disruptions. We commend you to stay tuned on our site for further developments. Please note that the need to maintain good and accurate books and records and to maintain those records in a manner compliant with 17A3, A4, and A5 perhaps has one of the greatest importance right now than ever, particularly when there is a business continuity plan being implemented and you've got remote working situations. It is important that you take a look at your policies and your procedures and update as needed to ensure that you are capturing, that you are, number one, that you're creating the right records, and that you are maintaining good record-keeping practices in compliance with 17A4. Similarly, with respect to financial responsibility, moment-to-moment capital is very important right now in light of fluid situations. It is important that your FinOp or your finance side of the house keep a close eye on counterparty risk and market participants and on filing deadlines, particularly where there may be challenges by, for example, auditors not being able to get on site or other challenges that may prevent the auditors from completing their work. We have been approaching the staff at the SEC with various scenarios and have found that there is quite a bit of attention by the SEC staff on these issues, but we commend you to keep those at the forefront. As you have a good part of your workforce, because of shelter-in-place issues, not reporting to your main office or one of your branches, keep in mind the effect of the rules related to the Office of Supervisory Jurisdiction or non-Office of Supervisory Jurisdiction branches. What does that mean to have folks work from home? How, are those spaces meeting the requirements and are you adequately able to supervise? Look to your BCP and ensure that you've got good plans to ensure supervision and adjust as needed, but but this is the time that will be looked back to ensure that you were doing everything you could to maintain appropriate supervision. Material non-public information and information barriers continue to be a high focus. In fact, I will point you to a statement by the co-directors of the SEC's Division of Enforcement regarding market integrity issued on March 23rd, 2020. So a couple of days ago, they noted that in these dynamic circumstances, corporate insiders are regularly learning new material non-public information that may hold an even greater value than under normal circumstances. This is particularly the case in earnings reports or required disclosures, which may be delayed due to COVID-19. So they are, these are the co-directors of enforcement reminding you that they are keeping a close eye on all these issues, and that, when in doubt, please consult, think it twice. The staff is there. We are certainly available to assist, but note that much of this will be judged in hindsight. So those are some special topics. The SEC's webpage and the FINRA webpage are very useful in this point. Let me turn to some operational changes at both of these entities. I will note that similar operational changes have occurred in other self-regulatory organizations of interest, and so keep an eye on both to ensure your continued operation. With respect to the SEC has fully transitioned to telework, and it's looking to implement open and closed commission meetings in that manner. Some of the deadlines for rulemakings have been pushed, but others have not. So, we're being asked a lot about Reg BI and the implementation date of June. We're being asked a lot about other rulemaking items. Stay tuned. We will continue to monitor it, and we'll post information as we learn of it, but we are in close communications with the SEC staff. As noted earlier, the SEC has provided a webpage dedicated to ongoing COVID-19 efforts, and we've made that available on the slides. The Office of Investor Education and Advocacy continues to issue investor alerts, so keep an eye out for those. And we encourage you to look at also FINRA's operational changes, which also has mostly transitioned to telework. And this is, again, a large part of the staff being in the Washington area and in Rockville. And with the orders in place, I think a lot of folks are working remotely. The in-person arbitration, mediation, and disciplinary hearings have been postponed through May 1st, 2020. FINRA, like the SEC, has a dedicated page for its ongoing COVID-19 efforts. The web address is provided in the slides for you. FINRA staff has released investor tips relating to emergency savings, diversification, market volatility, and so on. And we've also covered in this presentation other FINRA guidance related to the ongoing market disruption. I mentioned at the top of the hour the shelter orders. These are very important and very state specific. So the one thing that we want to make sure we cover, and again, we commend you if you have presence in any of these states, you should read the entire order. They're very specific, and they do vary by state. Who or what is an essential business or service that may be exempt from the shelter in place or the stay-at-home orders is one of those questions. So the shelter or stay-at-home restrictions in effect in many places, it impacts both the derivatives and the securities industries. For example, California has a definition of bank and financial institutions, but the reference is made to financial derivatives. Illinois has financial institutions, including banks, financial markets, affiliates of other financial institutions, entities that issue bonds, related financial institutions, and institutions selling financial products. On the other hand, New York has banks and related financial institutions included among essential businesses, but also include services related to financial markets. New Jersey has banks and other financial institutions included among essential businesses as well. Again, we've seen quite a bit of divergence among these, so do take a look at your particular state of interest. Finally, I wanted to point you to our Mayer Brown COVID-19 resources. This is a dynamic, quickly evolving situation, and we want to make sure that you have the latest information available to you. And so what we've done is we've created a resource, a web portal, a one-stop resource center that aggregates all of our legal updates, insights, and includes links to source material from our regulators, both foreign and domestic. We also have a COVID-19 response blog that provides timely updates, legal analysis, and commentary on the latest developments. And as always, our global travel navigator tool maps to more than 110 countries that have enacted quarantine, health checks, and other travel or visa restrictions. This is updated daily, and the tool indicates which travelers are affected by the fast-changing restrictions. I want to thank everyone for your time and wishing you health and safety in these very difficult times. And again, we're here to assist and to help you as we all deal with the effects of COVID-19. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marlon, and thank you as well to Matt, Ainsley, and Kyle. If anyone has questions, they should feel free to contact one of our speakers. Their emails are listed on the title slides, or you can consult the Mayer Brown resources that Marlon has mentioned. This concludes our webcast for today. We hope everyone stays healthy and safe. Thank you.